Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aditi Thakur. Currently, I am working as Acting Quality Assessment Lead in the Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment, which is a sub-office for OPQ. Today, I will be talking about how to apply CGMPs to the quality assessment of the application. Some of the topics which we will be discussing today is regarding the CGMP relationship to the quality, which will provide a background when a submission is received. What are some of the quality expectations related to the manufacturing assessment in applications? And how pre-approval inspectional findings along with the manufacturing assessment impact the final outcome of the application. We will also have some challenge questions, and finally there will be a summary of the discussion items. Let's start by describing the CGMPs. CGMPs cover a broad range of practices and principles that are implemented and documented to ensure that drugs are of consistent and high quality. These GMPs are backed by regulations. Drugs and biologics, including investigational products, are required to be manufactured in accordance with CGMPs under 501(a)(2)(b) of the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act. If not, may be deemed adulterated and subject to enforcement action under the Act. Applications for marketing approval may be denied if the CGMPs are not followed. Drug products must be manufactured in compliance with 21 CFR Parts 210 to 11, the current good manufacturing practices for finished pharmaceuticals. And for API are also subject to under 501. However, no GMP regulation exists for API manufacturing. Therefore, internationally harmonized guidance is available ICHQ 7. CGMPs are the minimum requirement and are in place for each step of the process. They increase the likelihood the product produced is safe and fit for intended purposes. Any data created as part of CGMP record must be evaluated by the quality unit as a part of release criteria according to the CFR 211 and 212 and should be maintained for CGMP purposes. The basic paradigms include quality assurance, quality control. These are the systems in place to ensure the control and consistency for the drug product. Documentation is very critical. If any activity is not documented, it probably never happened. When a submission is received in the agency, a team of experts perform a quality assessment of an application based on risk and knowledge management. So, one quality voice describes an approach in review teams to produce a single integrated quality assessment that captures OPQ's overall recommendation for the application. Currently, OPMA, my office, is responsible for performing the manufacturing assessment. To provide a better quality assessment, in certain cases, a single OPMA reviewer is responsible for performing the assessment of the micro, facility, and process portion of the submission. All these communications to the applicant are communicated through RBPM, who is the project manager for that submission. The RBPM works with the scientific application team lead to manage the review team and produce the overall recommendation of the submission. To provide a quality assessment for the submission, some of the key expectations related to manufacturing include that the proposed commercial manufacturing process in the submission can consistently produce a quality drug product over the life cycle, like understanding of the scale-up and control strategy for each manufacturing step. These steps should be adequately controlled to ensure the final drug product can meet all its quality attributes. So to evaluate this scientific basis is established for the degree of control is also assessed. In addition, all the facilities listed in the submission are evaluated to ensure that they are capable of performing their stated functions and have documented procedures, data, and corrective action. to ensure product will meet quality requirements. This will also include the adherence to the GMP regulations and appropriate FDA guidances. To provide the quality assessment of the manufacturing portion of the submission, OPMA reviewer utilizes review and inspection of the facilities as tools to provide the assessment on the overall design, controls, and implementation of these controls proposed for your manufacturing process. The quality assessment of the manufacturing is performed in a cross-functional integrated quality assessment team. In addition, the inspection is performed by a FDA investigator who has focus on the CGMP aspects of the manufacturing of that product. Investigator is also the part of the integrated quality assessment team as well. OPMA assessors may participate as subject matter expert on certain pre-approval inspections. Integration of the assessment and inspection activities seeks to drive balance between the oversight through the application and facilities. Through the submission review and on-site evaluation, the overall recommendation depends on how well the questions raised during the initial risk assessment are addressed, which may include like having the potential sources of variability are adequately identified. Was the scientific evidence supporting that the proposed process can consistently deliver quality product? Also, does the manufacturing process works as intended and remains in control? To address these questions identified by the FDA reviewers have some information resources like submissions to the agency, which may include the pre-IND meetings all the way through the supplements, as well as on-site assessments like pre-operational visits, inspectional assessments like pre-approval or post-approval or surveillance inspections. In addition to these resources, FDA reviewer also looks at the information gathered through quality reporting like FARs, DPQR, BPDRs, and others as well. After looking through all of these information resources, manufacturing assessor will conduct both the process and facility quality assessment and may participate on a pre-approval inspection. The assessor will have responsibilities which include that an objective risk assessment on the identified facilities and proposed commercial process designed to promote consistent risk-based assessment and initial PAI decisions. After that, a final determination on the need for a PAI after detailed and holistic risk assessment at the early stages is performed. Manufacturing process and product risks and mitigation strategies are evaluated with knowledge of the site CGMP compliance and manufacturing history. This allows agency to potentially decrease the occurrence of PAI requests late in the assessment cycle. This also allows us to streamline communications between process and facility assessments to the other members of the IQA team and inspection teams as well. Pre-approval inspections are triggered after the initial risk assessment is performed, and these inspections can be performed any time during the review cycle. Therefore, all the facility must be ready for inspection from the time of the submission. These inspections can sometimes be performed in conjunction with the surveillance as well. The prerequisite here is that for any submission which involves the facilities must be GMP compliant to support an approval recommendation. And this also means that PAI can only be performed if the site is in compliance status. PAI inspections are specific to the application. Either it can be for one application or several applications. The PAI provides assurance that applications are not approved if the applicant has not demonstrated the ability to operate with integrity and in compliance with the CGMPs. PAI covers CGMPs, but also they verify the information submitted for review, determine if the firm has adequate controls in place to manufacture the new product consistently. Therefore, the objectives of the pre-approval inspection are there in place to assure that the firm is ready for commercial manufacturing, adhering to the application commitments. This also includes the data integrity audit of the data submitted in the applications. Any negative finding for any of these objectives stated can result in non-approval of the application. The difference between the surveillance and PAI process lies in that surveillance inspections of the site covers all the six systems, including the quality system. They observe the actual condition and practicing at the facility. The PAI are rather product specific and cover the portion of the submissions like product development documentation, bioclinical manufacturing data, proposed manufacturing process, operational procedures, and batch records. In addition to that, it also covers analytical method development, investigations, and data integrity, which means that comparing the data submitted in the application with the raw data that is available at the site. The observations from PAI which impact the approval of the submission include if the firm is identified that the firm is not capable of responsibilities mentioned in the applications, for example, include that if the equipment for capsule filling machine proposed for commercial manufacture is not installed. It might be purchased, however, since the facility is not ready for commercial manufacture, then it can lead to approvability issues. In certain cases, we find that sometimes full-scale process validation studies were attempted prior to the PAI. However, it demonstrates that the process is under not control. An establishment is not making appropriate changes. Like we find that there are sometimes lack of appropriate controls with multiple batch failures. These all indicate that the firm is not ready to commercial manufacture the product as stated in the application. In addition, if during the pre-approval inspection, if it is identified that there is a lack of conformance to the application and certain data integrity issues are observed, for example, falsified data, which can include complete fabrication of the sterility testing, bioburden samples, endotoxin testing, or media fills. In certain cases, if there are changes in the specification which was not reported in the applications, can also be another data integrity issue. And other issues related to data integrity are testing into compliance, repeated testing until passing results are obtained, deletion of initial results, inadequate investigations. If we find this during a pre-approval inspection, these are going to impact the overall recommendation for the application. The pre-approval inspections are conducted by the FDA investigators, which provide the initial application recommendation for the facility based on the outcome of the PA at the site itself. The results of the PA are documented in the EIR, which is known as Establishment Investigation Report. ORA will provide their recommendation for the application and facility approvals for ORA conducted inspections. Then the pre-approval manager will enter the district office recommendation of approve or withhold into our systems following the PAI. Approval recommendation is made in cases that the inspection found no significant issues and the response to the observation provided by the firm was acceptable. Withhold recommendation is made when investigators observe that the site is not GMP compliant. The information in CMC is not consistent with the site records, or information is not accurate and complete. Applicant's response is reviewed in this case as well. These responses are reviewed by the OPMA reviewer, which provide the final recommendation to the facility. Therefore, the response to the observation is very important. OND or OGT makes the ultimate decision on whether to approve or withhold the application. To further clarify, for any PAS performed, ORA makes the initial pack code classification, which can be NAI, VAI, POAI. Pack code is also known as Program Assignment Code. ORA will further review the EIRs and finalize the pack and profile codes for the NAI and VAI inspections. If the ORA recommends a withhold when there are significant pre-approval product-specific observation issues, the OPMA reviewer will further conduct a review of the product-specific elements along with the firm's response. In addition to this, the OPMA reviewer will also look into the product-specific issues. He can also ask for additional information to the facility through a RAI, which is known as Request for Additional Information. The OPMA reviewer can either concur or non-concur with the initial recommendation. After that, the final facility recommendation of approve or withhold is made in relationship with the application and the compliance status of the facility. The overall recommendation may be affected by either one or both. So the CGMP compliance status is very critical to the application assessment. Since when systemic CGMP deviations found during the surveillance inspection or during the assessment that implicate the reliability of the data generated by the manufacturer, agency assesses the impact of the data generated for application products and takes appropriate actions for those pending approval. Since these issue creates the questions to the assessor that whether the data submitted in the applications to the FDA is reliable and truthful, can we be confident the drugs will have meet their labeled and purposed quality requirement? Since in order to make a knowledgeable judgment, the FDA reviewer whether to approve or deny an application, the agency should have confidence that the data presented to the application is a true and reliable representation of the drug quality. Ensuring CGMP compliance is an important component of industry responsibility to ensure the safety and efficacy of the drugs and FDA's ability to protect the public health. Time for the challenge question. During the PAI of the facility, it was observed that stability studies were performed on samples packaged in amber glass bottles. As per the submission, applicant has proposed container closure system LDPE bags to store the finished product ABC. The recommendation for the submission can be approve or withhold. The answer is withhold, since the firm lacks the qualification data for the proposed container closure system to store the finished drug product, which can also mean that it is non-conformance to the application. Our common goal here is the drug product quality. Integrated quality assessment is the cornerstone of the FDA's quality oversight for human drugs. PAI provide valuable assurance that products approved will meet quality standards in conformance with the CGMPs. Let us communicate, collaborate, and work together to deliver a high-quality drug product that meets the patient needs. I really acknowledge the fellow colleagues who provided valuable input to this discussion. The names are listed here in this slide. Thank you.
Hello, this is Tara Guin-Bizjack. I am the Director of Manufacturing Quality Guidance, Policy and Standards within the Office of Manufacturing Quality, Office of Compliance within CDER. Today I'll be talking about compliance trends and guidance while engaging manufacturers. So the learning objectives are to describe CDER's Office of Compliance and Office of Manufacturing Quality, to identify current trends in CGMP enforcement program, as well as to discuss the importance of contract manufacturer and supplier selection, and talk about some different tools to use during selection and throughout commercial manufacturing. So I'm going to start with the Office of Manufacturing Quality, what we do, and I'll start with Office of Compliance since I know that I'm the only compliance speaker at this the Generic Drug Forum. So the CDER's Office of Compliance, our mission is to shield patients from poor quality, unsafe, and ineffective drugs through proactive compliance strategies and risk-based enforcement action. So OMQ is one of the sub-offices of Office of Compliance, and we evaluate compliance with current good manufacturing practice, or CGMP, as you've probably seen before, for drugs based on inspection reports and evidence gathered by FDA investigators. We develop and implement compliance policy and take regulatory actions to protect the public from adulterated drugs in the U.S. market. So the drug adulteration provisions, which Office of Compliance regulates, includes all different sections of 501. OMQ often focuses on 501A2B, failure to conform with CGMP, current good manufacturing practice. It also in terms of other like compounding drugs. We also use 501A2A for unsanitary conditions, and then for, in general, 501B, and then certainly 501J, which is one of the newer provisions where a drug is deemed adulterated if the owner-operator delays, denies, refuses, or limits inspection. So, Office of Manufacturing Quality's fiscal year 2019 actions and concept of operations update. So I have some slides focused on fiscal year 2019. So these are some of the enforcement and advisory tools that Office of Manufacturing Quality works with. So from regulatory meetings or injunctions, consent decrees, import alerts, seizures, warning letters, untitled letters, and administrative detention. And you can see that the majority of our work is in warning letters, and then regulatory, so warning letters after a inspection, regulatory meetings as well after an inspection, and then import alerts can be an outcome of a violative inspection as well, where drug product is prevented from entering the country for foreign manufacturers. We also work with different types of regulatory discretions where needed, such as shortage situations and other kind of scenarios. So that's a part of what we work on as well. These regulatory actions, note that they do exclude compounding related actions as well. So we're in terms of the warning letter distribution, this is the last 5 years. So you can see warning letters in the different areas of the manufacturers that we inspect. And some of the recent trends over the last few years that we've seen in warning letters, and that you'll see if you go onto our website and take a look at some of the warning letters. A lot of the inspections lately have been focused on very rudimentary CGMPs. So, for example, release testing, not performing it. Also, release testing, in-process testing, raw material testing as well. So we're seeing that cleaning, equipment maintenance, basic sanitation issues, cross-contamination risks. These are more often than not for the non-application or OTC monograph drugs. The last few years, we've really been focusing on cleaning up the inventory in terms of facilities that we have in the database that have never been inspected. So that's why we're seeing a lot more of these non-application OTC monograph drugs, and a lot of the issues that come along with those. We're also continuing to see issues related to data integrity. This is a big area that to bring to everyone's attention as well. So investigators are seeing lack of control over access to the computer systems, where there could be multiple instances, but just say, for example, where there's a shared login information for a particular piece of equipment in the laboratory, and everyone can use the same login information. So it's not clear who performed the work. Documentation that's non-contemporaneous, as well as deletion, falsification, alteration as well. So we're seeing that, and I'll drill down into that a little bit on the next slide. We're also seeing issues in the supply chain, so API repackers and relabelers that are not including all the information necessary on their certificate of analysis when they're reselling the API. Also contract manufacturer issues, and we're going to talk more about that, making sure the contract manufacturer and the who they're working for everyone, you guys are locked together and working together closely. And so we have been seeing some issues where the contract manufacturers are having problems, and that's an issue for both the product owner as well as the contract manufacturer. Also seeing issues in sterility assurance, both on the compounding side as well as conventional manufacturing in the areas of aseptic technique, environmental monitoring, and design of the facility. And then we're continuing to see actions related to delay, deny, limit, or refuse inspections, as I talked about on the previous slide. Okay, so in terms of drilling down into data integrity, we're continuing to see warning letters. We're continuing to see cases that result in warning letters related to data integrity. So you can see here the blue bar on the bottom. You can see the last 3 years has been around 30 plus letters that are specific to data integrity as well as other findings. And you can see that that's a good portion of all the warning letters that go out include data integrity charges, about a third. And this is mostly related to OTC, but you also see many letters on the API and prescription drug side as well. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit and moving into the selection of manufacturers and suppliers. So I like to compare this to getting married. So while it is important to continue good communication practices, talking together about big purchasing decisions and all the sort of life cycle maintenance activities, if you will, the most important part of having a good marriage is selecting the right person, right? And it's the same with selecting manufacturers and suppliers. If you're careful in your selection process, that it's not about selecting the most cost-effective supplier, but it's about the one where your quality system meshes together, and you can have a good working relationship with them, and you can rely on them to communicate well with you and manage issues within their own quality system, then that's really half the battle. The life cycle maintenance is still incredibly important, and so I don't want to downplay that at all. But that initial selection is going to save you a lot of headaches down the road if you select someone that does not mesh well with your company. So just to bring your attention to some relevant the statute and guidance documents. So this is a statute that went into effect in 2012. It's in section 501, so that same area of the adulteration drug adulteration provisions that we talked about earlier. But it's actually in addition to the definition of current good manufacturing practice. So if you go to section 501 and you go to the end of that section, you'll see this language where current good manufacturing practice includes the implementation of oversight and controls over the manufacture of drugs to ensure quality, including managing the risk of and establishing the safety of raw materials, materials used in the manufacturing of drugs, and finished drug products. So in essence, CGMP requires effective quality management, requires effective oversight, and that in my mind includes the selection and includes of suppliers and contract manufacturers and how you work with them as well. And that is all part of CGMP. It's not something that can be sort of contracted away. So there's a few guidance documents as well that I can bring to your attention, and then I have a few references for ones that didn't quite fit into the timing of this presentation. So ICH-Q10, the Pharmaceutical Quality System guidance that is a FDA guidance for industry, has this in section 2, management responsibility, talks about the oversight of outsourced activities, and that the pharmaceutical company is ultimately responsible to ensure processes are in place to assure the control of outsourced activities and quality of purchased materials. So a lot of the supply chains that are out there can be very, very complex and have multiple parts, and certainly the implementation of redundant manufacturing and having backups is really important as well in terms of preventing potential drug shortages, and that sort of thing. And that is part of the pharmaceutical company responsibilities to make sure that you're selecting the right suppliers, outsourcers, and that you're continuing to work with them, and that's part of that oversight. So some examples of these responsibilities include assessing prior to outsourcing operations or selection of your suppliers. Okay, so this is what I've mentioned now a couple times, the importance of making that initial assessment to make sure that you're partnering with the right companies. Establishing a written agreement with the outsourcer. Monitoring and reviewing the performance and quality of the material, and identifying or implementing any needed improvements. Okay, so that's more in the life cycle piece. And then ensuring the use of approved sources as well. So in 2016, FDA published a guidance for industry on contract manufacturing arrangements for drugs, focusing on the quality agreements. And it outlines the critical roles played by product owners in contracted facilities, explains how manufacturers should use quality agreements to define, establish, and document their responsibilities, and emphasizes that quality agreements should define parties' responsibilities, assure full CGMP conformance, as well as facilitate consistent delivery of safe and effective medicines. And this, I encourage you all to take a look at this guidance. There's a lot of good information in there. It also talks about the importance of the product owner in terms of continuing to be responsible for the appropriate parts of CGMP. So in terms of the overall release of product and distribution of product, it's not something that can be contracted away, written into a contract where the product owner or applicant is no longer responsible for the quality of the products. It's a two-part responsibility. So here's a couple examples of warning letters that relate to the issue of suppliers and outsourcing contract manufacturing. So there's one instance where there was a contracted facility, and it was a contract lab that was testing the drugs of the applicant. And what was cited in the warning letter was, as a contract laboratory that tests drugs, your firm is responsible for complying with CGMP. In addition, it is also essential that your firm provide test results for evaluation and consideration by the owner of the product to consider in its final disposition decision. Okay, so this is something that I've seen in my past years as an investigator, where the contract lab will tell me, oh, I didn't investigate that errant peak because I'm not paid for investigations. So that's not an acceptable practice. If there is a contract lab that is doing testing, they're responsible for complying with CGMP as well, and that includes investigations under 192. So that's just an example. Not specific to this particular warning letter. But in this case, with the same inspection at that contracted facility, at that contract lab, the owner of the product also got a warning letter for failing to properly evaluate the contract laboratory to ensure CGMP compliance of operations occurring at the contract site. They did not audit the contract lab, and after FDA inspected, then the owner audited the lab and found critical and major deficiencies. Okay, so then this is the text that was in the warning letter, and says you are ultimately responsible for the quality of your product and the reliability of test results, regardless of who tests your products or the agreements in place. Okay, so that's one example where with one inspection there were two warning letters that were sent out. And then here's another example, and this has been cited in more recent warning letters, but I like using this just because there were 3 warning letters just in January 2018 alone that cited the exact same thing, where you do not have a supplier qualification program. While you source components from various suppliers, you have not performed any testing to validate the reliability of each supplier's certificate of analysis. your firm neglected to qualify suppliers before relying on their certificates of analysis, and they failed to test incoming APIs for use in drug products and released the API based on the certificate of analysis without verifying the reliability, establishing the reliability of the analysis. Okay, so this is definitely, as I mentioned in terms of the warning letter trends, this is definitely a trend that we see and that it's important for you to be aware of when selecting the right companies to contract with. Okay, so here are some tools, just a few tools for that initial selection process and the ongoing risk management to oversee your contract manufacturing and supplier qualification. Some of these are going to be appropriate, some of these might not, but for example, having an overall risk management strategy, so identifying what is important, what should be done, how often audits should be done, that overall approach when we're going to decide that that facility is a good partner for us, and the decision points along the way. Also, really important is understanding the inherent characteristics of the product and component. So if you know what is critical to your product, then you can zone in on that when you're working with your contract manufacturer supplier. Making sure that your outsourcer has good process understanding principles in terms of developing their knowledge, as well as a good approach to process validation. Oftentimes, manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies will use like a questionnaire to assess the quality of a contract manufacturer or supplier in the interim between on-site inspections. So that's another tool as well. Having a strong communication infrastructure, including a change management plan. So when things change, at either from your perspective or from the contract manufacturer supplier perspective, it's clear when you need to talk together and discuss any changes and the potential impact on the product and product quality. I already talked about the audit program, so on-site audits and evaluation of findings. It's not enough just to go and do an audit. You need to evaluate what you find and work towards improvement as well, and making sure that they're still meeting your standard. I talked about the importance of quality agreements earlier. So this goes hand in hand with communication infrastructure. When communication is strong and the different parties know their responsibilities, this leads to a more robust working relationship and partnership as well. Metrics and analytics programs are also very useful in terms of working to assess your suppliers or contract manufacturers' overall quality and approach to quality, and how they ensure that they have robust manufacturing in place, and how they're measuring their own quality system, and then really how they're driving improvement, right? So if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so, so that definitely is something to consider as you're selecting and then working with your suppliers and contract manufacturers throughout the product life cycle. And then last, report cards are also valuable. So communication back and forth is kind of the approach there using these report cards. Okay, so there's some additional references as well. So I didn't cite 210, 211, which are the current good manufacturing practices for finished pharmaceuticals, but that's also extremely relevant, as well as some other guidance documents. So Q7, which is current good manufacturing practice for APIs, Q9, quality risk management, and then the last reference on here, the guidance for inspection, quality systems approach to pharmaceutical CGMP regulations, which has a lot of information on applying CGMPs. Okay, so challenge question number 1, which of the following is an enforcement advisory tool used by OMQ to regulate CGMP manufacturers? A, warning letter, B, import alert, C, injunction, or D, all of the above? So of course we're going to go with D, all of the above. These are just examples of tools. I talked about 8 different tools before I mentioned them in the beginning slides. Okay, the second challenge question. Oversight of manufacturing of raw materials, in-process materials, and finished drugs is part of current good manufacturing practice. True, false, and for those that like to hedge their bets, maybe true, maybe false. So the answer is true. The oversight of manufacturing raw materials, in-process materials, and finished drugs is part of current good manufacturing practice, and that was added to the regulations in 2012. So with that, I want to leave you with some key messages. So the initial selection of the contract manufacturers and suppliers is a critical decision that we talked about. Risk management can be used as a systematic approach to management of contract manufacturing and supplier qualification. Those were some of the tools are under that risk management umbrella on that slide with all the tools. And I urge you to go back to take a look at Q9, the guidance for inspection Q9 and quality risk management that has more information in there. And then last, the owners and contracted supplier facilities, contract manufacturers and supplier facilities should work together proactively to characterize and control risks to product quality and patient safety. Okay, with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions. You can send them to my email address on the slide. Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Tara. It was very good. We're actually now going to, let me go ahead and change the layout of the room here so we'll be all set up for the Q&A. And I am going to pass it over to Lisa to go ahead and share our first question.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to our presenters. Our first question is for Aditi. Are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So they want to know if a service provider is used to perform activities per ASTM in support of a shipping study for a combination product, but the lab doesn't generate actual testing results. Will this service provider need to follow GMP? Does this one-time use service provider need to be included in the filing?
Yeah, so since the service provider is used to support the submission data, so it should be listed in the filing. So you can list it under Module 3. It doesn't need necessarily to be in the 356H form. And this facility we don't evaluate, so they don't need to follow the GMPs, but what's wrong in following the GMPs? So yeah, I think so that's the answer.
Okay, great. And we have another question for you. Will a PAI inspection be performed if a site is under a warning letter or pending final EIR after an inspection?
So as I stated in my slides, any facility, if they have to be evaluated during a filing, they have to be in GMP compliance to get the final approval. So it also applies to the PAI inspection as well. So in order for us to perform a PAI inspection, they have to be GMP compliant. So if they are under warning letter, we cannot perform a PAI inspection.
Okay, great. And another question for you. If a PAI is scheduled after an initial risk assessment without notes on timing, can you talk about that situation and the timeline estimates for the determination for an original ANDA application with a 10-month GDF goal date?
Okay, so generally when we receive a filing, OPMA reviewer has almost 60 days to perform an initial risk assessment to schedule a pre-approval inspection. However, when you submit your 356H form, in there is a requirement that your form is ready for pre-approval inspection. You have to answer yes or no, and that also depends that if the 356H form says that you are not ready for pre-approval inspection, you will not be able to do the inspection, and we will cite in a response to you. So from that point, when you do your filing, till the time of the end of 10-month clock, we can, anytime during that time, we can perform a pre-approval inspection.
All right, great. And we have another inspection question for you. How is a product pre-approval inspection handled for a site contract manufacturing the same generic product for multiple product owners or markets? Will FDA inspect data from products manufactured for the same sponsor, or are they going to do another type of inspection?
So this also comes under pre-approval inspection. So any data that is supporting the submissions can be evaluated through pre-approval inspection. So since this facility is responsible for performing the stability testing for the applications, we will do same procedures. We do our initial risk assessment, and if there is a need to perform a pre-approval inspection, we will also schedule a pre-approval inspection.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question is going to be for Tara. So Tara, you're ready for questions?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Great.
Hello?
Hello. All right. So our first question for you is a quality agreement expected to be established with critical suppliers and contract labs during the development phase, or can it be established after filing approval?
So the recommendation for having a quality agreement is definitely a recommendation, and it's a really good idea. The guidance that we have that's out, I believe I provided a link or at least a name for you to Google it, is primarily relevant to, it's for commercial manufacturing. However, the guidance does not explicitly apply to the manufacturer of development materials or clinical trial materials. However, we do believe that quality agreements can be very valuable in delineating the activities of all parties involved in this early development work, and these arrangements and the delineation of responsibility. And many of the principles described in the guidance can also be applied in the pre-commercial stages of the pharma life cycle. So, I definitely recommend that you're not only are you partnering with the right contractors during development and suppliers, especially for critical materials, but you have also identified the responsibilities, the overlap, and who will be handling what. So I think that that's always a good idea, and especially in development, because that's setting yourself up for success down the road.
Great. Thank you, Tara. All right, we have another question about suppliers. So, should critical suppliers and contract labs be audited prior to submission? Is a paper assessment acceptable, or do you need to have an on-site audit?
So, I think that this decision should be a risk-based decision. However, I would personally find it very difficult to decide to partner with critical suppliers and contract labs without, seeing where the manufacturing will be done and making sure that that I would have a good working relationship with those critical suppliers and contract labs. So, I think that it would be very valuable to do on-site audits. I've heard stories of paper assessments being just that whatever is on paper is what they want you to hear and they want you to know about, rather than what is actually occurring at the facility. So I'm a former investigator, so I always think it's helpful to know what actually occurs at the site, and so I would think that on-site audits would be valuable in this situation. Now, paper assessments can be helpful throughout the life cycle manufacturing. But you know, you want to know where it's being made and what conditions your product is being made in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I believe that's all the questions that we have time for. So I'm going to pass it back to Jeff we're going to pass it back to Brenda, who's going to be giving some closing remarks.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Aditi. Oh my, this has been a very experimental 2-day event, and it's been a little bit longer than we expected, but we sincerely appreciate your flexibility with the change in schedules, your patience with our technical hiccups, and your perseverance with staying with us. Definitely your attendance to begin with. So remember that the email for CEs, that's CMEs, CNEs, and CPEs, we will send that out either later tonight or first thing in the morning. So keep a lookout for that. And then also, please remember to do your survey, give us your feedback. That's the only mechanism by which you can download the certificate of appreciation. No, I'm sorry. We do appreciate you, but it's a certificate of attendance. And we have 2-week deadline on both of those, both the CEs and both the survey. Remember, if you do not complete the CEs within that 2 weeks, we are physically, we are unable to help you after those 2 weeks. So please do your very best to do them within the 2 weeks. Hopefully, next year, please God, we'll see you, and we will see you in person, and things will be back to normalcy in somewhat. I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.